On Ilum, the ice groans like something alive. Younglings file into the crystal caves with chattering teeth and wide eyes, each one guided by a whisper only they can hear. Most return holding blue or green shards, tradition, order, the old songs of the Jedi. But Anakin Skywalker is not most. In this telling, the Force leads him to a different alcove, to a glow not of soldier's blue, but of living green, soft as moss and bright as sunrise. He reaches out. The cave falls quiet, and the future changes. Let's begin. He wasn't just another Padawan tucked behind a master's robes. He was the boy from Tatooine, the one the council never knew what to do with. Love and fear packed into one small frame, a storm inside a smile. The crystal's light painted the frost on his glove, steady, patient, like a hand on his shoulder. When he returned to Obi-Wan, he held up the green shard with a grin he couldn't hide. "A green one," Obi-Wan said, eyebrows lifting. "Well, that will give the council something to discuss." "Is it wrong?" Anakin asked. "Wrong," Obi-Wan chuckled. "No, surprising, certainly. But the Force doesn't make mistakes back on Coruscant. When he presented the completed saber, the council chamber hummed with unspoken questions. Green had always been the color of those who listened first, who touched the living Force with quiet hands, who preferred to end a conflict before it began. Masters Yoda and Kit Fisto exchanged a knowing look. Mace Windu folded his arms, thoughtful but unreadable. Plo Koon's mask revealed nothing, but he tilted his head as if hearing a frequency others missed. "Green, your path shows," Yoda murmured, studying the boy more than the blade. "Attuned to life, to balance, to patience, Anakin flicked a glance at Mace. "I thought knights like me usually had blue." "Usually," Mace said, "is for statistics. The Force is not a census. What matters is what you do with the blade, not what it's called." The council's surprise wasn't disapproval, it was curiosity. How would a boy famous for acting first and thinking later carry a color associated with contemplation? What would green mean in Anakin Skywalker's hands? Training shifted in small but telling ways. Obi-Wan, ever the negotiator, leaned into the change without forcing it. He showed Anakin how to treat de-escalation as a first option rather than a concession. In the archives, Jocasta Nu directed him to recordings of old consular masters who had mastered the art of ending a fight before a saber left a belt. Master Kit Fisto, laugh easy, movements effortless, volunteered for extra sparring sessions. "Green suits you, Skywalker," he said, blades clashing and sliding. "It means you see the whole board, not just the next move." It wasn't perfect. Anakin bristled at patience drills, and when Luminara Unduli counseled stillness, he tried but felt like a caged lothcat watching birds. The green blade did not magically make him serene. What it did was give language to something he'd never had words for. The hum under everything. The way the city's din softened when he centered himself. The way Padme's presence didn't just quicken his pulse. It pulled him into a rhythm that felt honest rather than forbidden. The way the Force felt less like a weapon and more like wind in sails. There was a night in the room of 1,000 fountains when Yoda found him sitting alone, saber unlit, listening to water. "Hear it, do you?" the old master asked. Anakin nodded. "I always heard the Force like a storm. This sounds like rain." "Storms pass," Yoda said, easing down beside him with a small groan. "Rain feeds. Strong. The storm in you is. Feed others. You also can." Anakin glanced at the green hilt in his lap. "I don't feel like a consular." "Names," Yoda snorted, amused. "Labels. Carry you, they do not. Choose to carry them, you can." The first major test of green Anakin came on Geonosis. The sands were the same, the arena the same. Columns lined with gnashing beasts, Geonosian chitter echoing like dry leaves. Mace and the strike team ignited a forest of colored fire around Anakin and Padme, and the battle that followed did not care about anyone's philosophy. Yet even here the difference showed. Subtle, but real. When Anakin rushed to free Obi-Wan, his blade wasn't a hammer, it was a map. He watched, he read, he flowed. He protected Padme, Not just with strikes, but with awareness, redirecting droideka fire into pillars, guiding clone squads to cover, calling out to key Adimundi to cut a path rather than whirl through it. It didn't save lives the way a miracle would, but it nudged fate a few degrees to mercy. In Dooku's hangar, the confrontation still happened. "My powers have doubled since the last time we met, Count," Anakin said, stubborn spark intact. Dooku smiled that politely condescending smile. The duel started the same way, taunts, red and green painting the shadows, but Anakin's footwork showed new restraint. He still lunged, still tried to end it early, but he pulled back from the cliff's edge when he felt the old anger heat his face. The green crystal throbbed gently, as if reminding him to breathe. He lost the duel anyway. Arrogance is not a color, it's a habit. But he lost with less despair, and when Obi-Wan pressed a hand to his shoulder afterward, Anakin didn't flinch from the comfort. War swallowed the Republic. The 501st learned their general for the first time by the color at the head of the charge. Green Leader, Jesse joked at a mess table, and the name stuck for a month until Anakin frowned at the codename and they laughed and dropped it, because even a legend gets to set boundaries. The clones noticed other things too. That Skywalker listened when they complained about ration rotations, that he preferred stunning rather than executing captured militia, that in after-battle triage he walked through the med tents and laid a hand on foreheads, not as a mystic trick but as a human habit. None of that made him soft. It made him harder to hate. Palpatine noticed, of course, he always did. He began to phrase his compliments differently. "You see people, my boy," he would say in his office, the Coruscant sun catching in the chancellor's robe. "It's what makes you special. It's why you should sit on the council. The Republic needs that kind of nuance." The flattery was still a hook, but the bait changed flavors. The council responded in their own way. They didn't suddenly forget their reservations, but assignments shifted. Anakin found himself asked to lead talks on planets where battle seemed inevitable, to stand beside masters known for diplomacy, even when he insisted he preferred a starfighter's cockpit. On Aline, he accompanied Shaak Ti to mediate between subterranean and surface dwellers. On Onderon, he advised on insurgent training with an eye toward minimizing civilian harm. On Felucia, he learned from Aayla Secura how to read terrain not just for ambush, but for routes families might use to flee. He still burned with the urge to end the war now, but the Green Blade taught that ending a fight and ending a war were not the same skill. There came a mission to Zygerria that cut close to bone. Slavery was a wound he could taste, and Zygerria wore it like a crown. In the palace, when a slaver lord smirked and spoke of order, Anakin's knuckles whitened around the hilt. "Anakin," Obi-Wan said softly, a warning laced with trust. Anakin inhaled. "You traffic in chains," he told the slaver, voice steady. "We traffic in choices." He got the captives out. He would have preferred to drag the slaver through the streets. Instead, he dragged the man into court with evidence that even a Zygerian council couldn't ignore. That choice cost him nothing obvious. It fed something invisible. The green crystal did not prevent rage, it taught a new response to it. During one corridor fight, a Magna Guard's electrostaff cracked across Anakin's temple. He saw red, not just the color, the urge. For a breath, the green light in his hand dimmed, a flicker like a candle in a draft. He closed his eyes even while the staff pressed, not to retreat but to center. The hum steadied. He parried, disarmed, disabled, then ordered the droid's scrap cleared to free a trapped medic. Later, in the gunship, he stared at the hilt and muttered, "Don't ever do that again." He wasn't scolding the crystal. He was scolding himself. "Talk to me," Ahsoka Tano said, sitting across from him with chin propped in her hand. She had come into his life as a burst of laughter and stubbornness, a student who challenged his worst instincts by reflecting his best ones. "What happened?" "Nothing," he said, then grimaced at his own lie. "I nearly let something old make a decision for me." Ahsoka flicked her eyes to the green blade. "Looks like you overruled it. You're picking up bad habits from Kenobi." "Thank you," she said, sincere. Mortis came as it always does in any telling that dares take the Force seriously. On that realm where time is a rumor, The daughter's light, the son's shadow, and the father's burden reframed everything. The green saber glowed differently there, less a weapon than a tuning fork. When the son tempted him with visions of Padme dying, of the Order falling, the old gravity yawned beneath Anakin's feet. He hated that gravity. He wanted to fly. "You cannot save them through control," the daughter whispered, hand hovering near his blade. "You can save them through presence." He didn't fully understand. He understood enough to pull back from the promise that always dressed itself as mercy. He left Mortis with the same memories clouded by the father's last act. But some instincts survived erasure. The crystal remembered even if the mind did not. As the war stretched thin, Palpatine grew bolder. He dangled a council seat without the rank of master, not just to insult Anakin, but to kink the line of trust between him and his order. It worked somewhat. Anakin still felt the sting. He still wanted to be seen. But the green blade at his hip had taught him to measure recognition by the lives he touched rather than by titles on a plaque. When the council tasked him, in confidence, to report on the chancellor's conduct, he didn't hear only the distrust. He heard the plea. "Help us see what you see." He said yes, not as a spy thrilled to be in the shadows, but as a Jedi who had learned that truth required courage. Padme remained the Axis. Private vows whispered behind closed doors, hands clasped in corridors when no one looked. The visions began. Her breath failing, his hands empty, the universe indifferent. On the balcony, she found him staring at the city and the saber held near his heart. "Talk to me," she said, using the same words Ahsoka had, two corners of his life suddenly sharing a script that fit. "I'm afraid," he told her, "not of war, of losing you." "Then don't carry it alone," she said. "That's not love." That's a sentence. He closed his eyes and listened. The green hum thrummed softly. Not a cure, a compass. The final arc drew near. Grievous was on the move. The Senate roiled. The temple hummed with nerves. Dooku fell on the invisible hand, and choice weighed everything again. "Do it," Palpatine hissed when Anakin held the defeated count. The young man's knuckles tightened. He remembered Geonosis. He remembered the Magna Guard's staff. He remembered Mortis without remembering it. He took a breath that scraped his ribs. No. He powered down, turned away. Dooku lived to stand trial that never came, but that single moment took one stone out of the wall the Sith had been building for years. When Coruscant caught its breath, the Chancellor's mask slipped by degrees. He revealed just enough to make Anakin shaky, then retreated. He praised him, then needled him. He spoke of power as if it were simply another word for love. "You could save the one you care for," he murmured, "if the Jedi weren't so afraid." Anakin walked out with the turbo-lift door closing on that smile. He stared at the green hilt. "He's not wrong about fear," he muttered, "but he's wrong about everything else." He went to the council. He told Mace Windu what he'd heard. And Mace, who had studied him with suspicion for years, looked at the young man and saw something that hadn't been there before or had been hidden by noise. "Stay here," Mace said, hand firm on Anakin's shoulder. "If what you've told me is true, we'll need you clear when we return." Anakin hated waiting, but he had learned that waiting is not nothing. It is choosing. He stood at the window with Coruscant sprawled like a circuit board and felt the city breathe. He felt Padme across town, a warmth that made fear seem like a small, loud thing rather than a god. He felt Ahsoka out there somewhere, alive because she had learned to stand on her own feet. He felt Obi-Wan in a starfighter, brave and tired, and so dear. He felt the clones, the droids, the senators, the workers, the children, the old, life thrumming through Durasteel like sap through a tree. When the call finally came, Mace's clipped voice, lightning in the background, Anakin ran. He reached the office not with the recklessness of a boy, but with the urgency of a man who had learned the difference. The scene was the same. Windu's blade, holding back a storm. Sidious a knot of hate and cunning. "He controls the Senate," Mace shouted. "He's too dangerous to be left alive." Anakin stared at the Chancellor's twisted face, at the hands that had signed deployments and condolences with equal ease. The old script rose in his throat: fear, panic, the urge to cut the knot and call it justice. The green blade answered before he did, not with words, but with a feeling like a hand on the back, steady. "Then arrest him," Anakin said, stepping to Mace's side and igniting his saber. Together. Lightning arced. Glass exploded into the night. Two jets of green, amethyst, and emerald held the storm. Sidious snarled, forced back step by step, not by rage but by two different disciplines refusing to blink. When he feigned weakness and his voice slid into the wheedling tone that had swayed a galaxy, Anakin didn't hear salvation. He heard a fisherman yanking a line. He cut the line. Mace disarmed the Sith. The Chancellor collapsed, not dead, not free. Sirens screamed outside. Coruscant watched. They bound the most powerful man in the Republic and walked him into a future no one had planned for. And far below, in the temple, something else began to stir. Orders written years ago, contingencies embedded in flesh and circuit, a number that would break the spine of an era if no one listened for it. Anakin's green blade dimmed as he clipped it to his belt. "This isn't over," he told Mace. "No," Mace said. "Now the hard part begins." The galaxy turned toward a knife edge, and Anakin, green crystal steady at his core, prepared to balance on it. The arrest of the Chancellor should have been impossible. Whole strategies, whole disguises had been designed to ensure it never happened. But there he was, restrained, glowering, his voice a silken thread running through the Senate feed as the Masters escorted him into custody. "I am the Republic," he tried to declare. The Republic at last argued back. The moment Palpatine's physical leverage faltered, his backup plans bit down. A code embedded in the clone army, obedient as bone, listened for a specific rhythm. On 100 ships and worlds, comlinks crackled. "Execute Order Psi," the word cut off in some places. In others, it never began. It failed not because a miracle dispelled it, but because Anakin had listened months earlier when a single trooper named Fives had begged him to. In the original course of events, paranoia and miscommunication had scattered the warning into the wind. In this one, Anakin's green-honed habit of presence had kept him in the medbay longer, had made him press the Kaminoans harder, had gotten Shaak Ti to convene a closed-door review that pulled in the right masters and the right Senate oversight at exactly the right time. They didn't dismantle the entire scheme. It was too entrenched. But they complicated it, seeded fail-safes, taught certain commanders to question a very specific sort of impossible order if it came at a very specific kind of time. On Coruscant, as alarms wailed, Commander Appo hesitated, jaw tight. meant Dooku suddenly became a model prisoner, or Grievous hung up his cape. The separatist machine He died in prison a year later, not by blade but by age, and a sickness he'd hidden under a proud posture. The machines wound down, and the clones looked up like men coming out of a trance. Some left military life and opened garages or bakeries or schools, their inhibitor chips removed in sweeping programs that combined Kaminoan science with Jedi oversight and Senate funding. Others stayed in uniform and helped build a new defense force that answered to law, not to one man's whisper. Rex took command of a training corps. "I'm going to teach them to think," he told Anakin, "even if it makes them bad at parades." Padme gave birth to twins. They named them Luke and Leia. The names felt like clear mornings. Anakin held them with hands that still shook sometimes. He looked at their faces and felt fear try a familiar trick. It did not work this time. Love didn't demand bargains it couldn't keep. It demanded time and attention. He had both, not always as much as he wished, but enough to be a presence rather than a ghost. The order changed because change was the only proof they'd learned. They didn't throw out their code, they resurfaced it, treating attachment not as a poison but as a garden that required pruning and care. Masters began to speak honestly to initiates about feelings rather than treating them as contraband. Counseling became a practice, not a punishment. The archives added a wing devoted to Qui-Gon Jinn's philosophies. The living force re-examined, not worshipped. They didn't swing to license. They learned to name the difference between discipline and denial. The Council, in time, asked Anakin to sit among them, this time with the rank, not as a power move, but as acknowledgement of work done and perspective earned. He said yes with a humility that would have made his younger self roll his eyes and call it performative. It wasn't. He had learned that influence is not a toy. It's a responsibility to hold contradictions without letting them gnaw each other to death. He and Ahsoka repaired something words like expulsion and betrayal had once damaged. She chose not to return to the order formally. He honored it. "You taught me to listen to myself," she said. "If I come back someday, it will be because I can do that here." "I'll be here either way," he said. "Bring snacks when you visit. I know a senator who can requisition some. Tell her I prefer the ones from Naboo." Padme and Obi-Wan forged their own peace too. Old awkwardness turned to familial affection. Over dinner once, Obi-Wan held Leia, small hands already trying to grab his beard, and said, "She's going to run a planet one day." "Two," Padme said, without looking up from burping Luke. "And Luke will make friends with every mechanic in the galaxy," Anakin said, ruffling soft hair. "You say that like it's a threat," Obi-Wan replied, smiling. The green crystal, for its part, became a quiet center rather than a plot device. It never bled. It flickered in hard moments, the way any light does in wind, then steadied. On missions, people noticed its glow the way they might notice a tree at the edge of a battlefield. Not a guarantee of safety, but a reminder of what safety feels like. When Anakin sat with younglings, he let them hold the unlit hilt. The little ones loved the weight. "Is it true colors mean jobs?" one tiny voice asked. "No," he said. "Colors mean how you dance." "What's your dance?" "Messy," he answered, and they giggled. Years later, on a quiet day when Coruscant felt almost honest, Anakin walked alone through the room of 1,000 fountains. He ignited the saber without fanfare. The blade rose, green on green, both water and leaf. He remembered the boy on Ilum, the cold cave, the choice that didn't feel like a choice. He thought of all the places where the path could have broken: the hangar on Geonosis, the office with lightning, the temple doors, the prison cell where a voice tried to write his future for him. He counted the people who had held him when he could have fallen: Obi-Wan's steadying humor, Ahsoka's cheerful defiance, Padme's fierce clarity, Yoda's rain sense, Mace's respect learned the hard way, Rex's unflashy loyalty. He didn't owe them his soul. He shared it with them. He looked into the blade and saw his reflection as a wash of light. "Thank you," he told the crystal, which is to say he thanked the part of himself that had learned to sing. No prophecy printed new scriptures for the Order. The galaxy remained unruly. People remained people. The Force remained what it had always been: a field of life where choice is both terrifying and sacred. Anakin taught that to anyone who asked, and to many who didn't ask but needed it anyway. What if Anakin's Ilum trial ended with a green crystal? Balance would mean more than power. It would be the fight for compassion over control, every single day. Because balance is just the beginning. And the Jedi? They were the living heart of the Republic. If you enjoyed this alternate timeline, make sure to like and subscribe for more Star Wars stories, and may the Force be with you.